to me, my goal was just to be able to do enough good stuff so I can keep getting invited back to the party. So I can get to me, the goal is like if you can do work and keep getting hired to do more of that work, you know, to be able to do what you love doing, then to me, that's a success.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Comics Cube. I am back with who Sala Binanti calls the Polish Prince, Bill Sienkiewicz. I
Well,
understand that one time you forgot you had a signing and you were at a pool.
oh yeah, Sal loves to tell that story. Yeah, I think it's. I probably didn't forget. I probably just didn't particularly think it was as important at the time. I think I was just enjoying life way too much. I mean, I would come out to San Diego and I'd spend most of the time at Coronado, boogie boarding, or whatever, and then drive back to the convention. It was for me, it was a chance. I'd come back like if you've ever been to the San Diego Con or to Coronado Beach, where Top Gun and all that stuff. It's like we actually go in the water there. The water is filled with mica. So you come out and you look like like you're some fairy creature out of some alien world. I mean, sparkling and everything else. It's like long before vampires glittered in the sun. That's but I remember I came to the signing. I think yeah, I think I was still dripping wet when I showed up.
That's what
So
he said too.
yeah,
I went to San Diego once, not inside, just outside. Like, I saw all of the cosplayers and everything, and I was
right.
fine. Like, San Diego is a beautiful city. It
Well, that's the
almost
thing.
feel like I didn't need to go in.
Yeah. Well, San Diego has what most other conventions don't, which is it's got like the perfect weather for it, or climate, I should say, and it also has the waterfront. I mean, other cities might have the space, but they have the trade off. I mean, Vegas might have, like the space, but it's got the heat, and it's also got not much else to go with, except if you're not a gambler, or into
Mhm.
nightclub. But San Diego has some kind of something for everybody, you know, and um, which is why I think it's got the reputation as sort of the best of the best.
Yeah, I remember going out there and like eating the best tacos I've ever had
Yeah.
somewhere.
Oh, oh yeah, and you're literally what, a couple of miles from Mexico. From certainly I remember going to Tijuana a number of times. And there's stories like we asked me earlier before we came on the air about stories. Like there are a couple stories that I have. One that's like sort of my own, but it was just totally not, like non-eventful and just wonderful. And then a couple of I've heard about that involve other creators and nights in jail and things like that. Uh,
Feel
we'll
free
we'll
to tell your story.
go. Well, mine was just it was just like I went there and it was just like to be across the border and then go and have like a really lovely dinner for a farm kid from New Jersey, to go to Mexico, um, as if it was just another day. I mean, it was special, obviously to go, but I was just locked away, so isolated in that neck of the woods in New Jersey, that when I started doing comics opened up my whole world, and literally the world. So, there's really no story to go with my first excursion into Tijuana, in San Diego, except that it was just part of the expansion of what I was used to, or what I would soon become used to in terms of the global aspect of it, because it was like, oh, and comics allowed me to do this, and comics opened the door to that, and comics opened up the door to you know to having really great Mexican food in Mexico. It was like, who'd have thunk it. So
You never know, right? You never know what opens the door for you.
right,
Yeah.
exactly.
What about that
So
story where people are in jail? Can you tell that story?
well, okay, well, I have to be careful about some of the names. I mean, whether or not some of these people are still around. It's there was a colorist who colored. I think his name was Peter Ledger, Australian chap, and he colored the Weird World stuff over Buscema. That it was actually inked by Rudy Neveris,
Okay.
and it was sort of Marvel's answer to Lord of the Rings at the time, and it was really amazing stuff. But Marvel was much more open then, and when I say open, I mean literally open. Um, that I could come in through the back entrance, come up through the freight elevator, and everybody in the mailroom would just let freelancers in, say, hey, how you doing? And would just walk in. Nobody was worried about security in the sense of the kind of insanity that they have now, where you need to leave a blood sample and kind of get a check by um, you know by domestic issues or whatever. And yeah, you come in and you have to like leave your passport, get it, like wear a patch, or a sticker with your name on it, and you're escorted everywhere. I mean, back in those days, it was none of that. Anyway, Peter was there. Peter was living at Marvel. He had his own setup in the back offices amongst flat files, and he used to wear shorts, no shirt, cut off. They were cut off jeans, and of course, everybody else was at Marvel. I'm talking about, John Romita Jr., John Romita Sr. was there. It's like Virginia was there. Shooter would walk around. Everybody in the bullpen was there, and it was like when you got toward the back of the offices, it was sort of this little darker area. It felt a little less corporate. I mean, not that it felt corporate at all. I mean, I'm realizing I'm setting this whole thing up, but he was there, and he would walk around and no shoes, cut off shorts, no underwear, which I found out from other women who worked there. They just so happened to like find out from certain positional changes. When he changed, it was like, oh god, he's not he's not got his jewels covered, but loved, he was a big airbrush guy, loved color, like a color, and he had his theories about how you should use every color possible in the spectrum on every page. So it wasn't like there was a muted page that was oranges or earth tones. It was like everything was polychromatic, and that was his ethos. Anyway, he was very ebullient and very effusive and very opinionated. And so he, of course, pissed off and also was loved by many people up there. But this one particular editor-in-chief, and not editor-in-chief, I'm not saying it wasn't Shooter, it was another editor who who was a prankster, and he decided he was going to have some fun with Peter. And this was Peter went to San Diego, and he was going to go to Tijuana. And this editor pulled him aside and said, "Here's what you do: when you go to Tijuana, when they bring you the bill, just say you're not going to pay it." And he says it's a cultural thing that happens between Americans and people in Tijuana. It's like they will insist that you pay it, and you keep up on putting up like a barrier. It's like, but no, I'm not going to pay this. And what you have to do is you actually have to escalate the situation, make it seem like you're actually fighting and getting more and more belligerent. And it's like, and then when it gets to the most volatile point, it's like everybody sort of breaks character and laughs, and it's like they bring out tequila, and everybody has a good laugh, and it's sort of like like it's the whole like evening. It's a big sort of joke and a cultural exchange that everybody sort of who goes there at any to any extent knows all of this. It's like, so he goes, so thank you for that information. he goes there, proceeds to do all of that, and ends up, of course, getting arrested, and
Of
spending
course.
the night in jail. And meanwhile, it's like what they had done while he was in jail is that they had broken into his San Diego hotel room, the editor, and proceeded to do every sort of, schoolboy prat, like filling his boots with shaving cream, short sheeting the bed, just probably with some flourishes of some, like things that might get you arrested now, but it it really messed Peter up from what I understand. It's like when he finally got out, it's like, like, and explained, because Peter was sort of nonplussed. He goes like, but I was told that this is what you do. So he finally explained. I think they felt bad for him because obviously he certainly wasn't American, and it was so over the top that when he finally got out. But when he went back to his hotel room, I think he was looking for blood. And then, of course, when that happened, I don't think he ever actually, I don't know if he found out who did it, or if he did, if he was ever able to sort of exact any kind of revenge. But these were the kinds of bizarre things that I remember hearing about from different people. It's like that. It's one of those situations where you're laughing and kind of covering your eyes at the same time. Like, oh, that's horrible. I mean, that's horrible. And yet knowing all the people involved, it's like I can picture how it all went down. And it's just, it's just one of those things that always stayed with me. So
Wow. That is quite a story.
Yeah. So
I'm assuming
don't,
things like that don't happen anymore.
what's that again?
I'm assuming things like that don't happen anymore.
They probably do, but I think that things are a little, they feel like they're far more volatile. As perverse as that sounds, it's actually kind of benign because you're not, the likelihood of getting shot now is probably much higher, or certainly the level of volatility and tension wise in terms of ethnicity and everything else. I think we're going down a whole different path right now.
Yeah.
So, this was a good 15, 20 years ago. So,
you mentioned growing up on a farm in New Jersey, and that you've mentioned in other interviews how that made you want to prove yourself. But I was wondering if you found the atmosphere of that maybe informing your artwork. And where I'm coming from with that is because I was talking to Craig Thompson at one point, and he was saying that he believes that he draws a lot of like wide open air stuff because he grew up in a rural area, and somebody like Chris Ware, who grew up in New York City or in Chicago, draws a lot of cramped, confined stuff. I was wondering if that was true for you, if in any way.
Oh, that's actually a really interesting observation. I would say it absolutely does. I was like, for example, I mean, one thing that comes immediately to mind is, growing up in New Jersey where I did, it was like winters could be particularly harsh, I mean, and we would get heavy duty snow, a dusting, you could wake up one morning and have your car covered with like 6 inches of partly cloudy, it's like, oops, we made a mistake. It's like, but the solitude and the quiet, the quietness and the sort of immensity of being out in the woods and just watching the snowfall where you can't hear anything, and the isolation aspect of that, or the summer rains, being, in the similar areas, or being out at night and, watching heat lightning where there's no street lamps, and you're watching, or just seeing lightning bolts splash down, or being out in the middle of a field and just seeing all kinds of, hearing peepers and different frogs and owls, and then just watching all these fireflies sort of just dancing. So growing up with that, it's like there's a magic to all of that. And there's also certain of things that level of immense space and silence kind of can evoke, that can also be sometimes kind of creepy and eerie. So I remember when I did the later issues of Moon Knight with Morpheus, that with his dream stuff, and it took place in the snow. And then later on, in the New Mutants, where Danny goes up against the Demon Bear, I couldn't help but sort of like bring back the memory of what it was like to grow up in those like woodland areas with excessive snow, and not being able to see like sometimes 10 feet in front of you, depending on how much the blizzard was actually hitting you.
Yeah.
So whereas I can totally understand with Chris Ware. Those the size of his panels are just, they're like evocative, and they're claustrophobic as hell, to me. So, but yet they're so incredibly effective. So, so yeah, it absolutely was part and parcel of what I put into my work.
It's interesting. In the 80s, right, there was it was the height of the creators' rights movement. And I was wondering how you look back on that now. Obviously, you still do a lot of corporate work, a lot of posters and inks and covers. How do you look back on that time period now? How do you think the industry has changed in regards to that type of topic?
Well, I think with creators' rights, I think that just probably opened up more arenas for the creators to get into, to to eventually be bought out by somebody else. It's like, hey, we're fighting for our creative rights. It's like, we're not going to give into this company or this publisher or whatever. We're just going to do well enough so that eventually, when one conglomerate owns everything, it's like they will eventually own. So the creators' rights, it's like it depends on what level you get to. I mean, like I look at you know, Eastman and Laird, when they did the Turtles. I mean, they were like the guys. Dave Sim with Cerebus, and those are just two of the probably the more well-known ones. But everybody was doing their own creator-owned stuff, and but now I think most of the creator-owned work is probably part of some corporations, not necessarily Disney's, or but Disney does seem to own a lot. I mean, I remember when the Muppets were independent, and that's when I even talk about comic books. So
Yeah,
I
even
love
the Turtles now are owned by Nickelodeon.
yeah, and I think, yeah, and I don't know again if Nickelodeon is also part and part. It's like you look at the list of corporations that own all of these brands. Like Nestle owns just so many other brands. And the same thing with Disney owning so many smaller entities. So I mean, even when Frank and I did Electra Assassin, we did that under creator-owned rights because of Epic. So even though Electra was for Marvel, Garrett, Perry, all of the other characters that were in there were creator-owned. And then like there was a whole negotiation later on where they wanted to put Garrett into Agents of Shield or something. It's like, so there was a whole negotiation that went on for negotiation for rights. So those things continually happen. So I think that certainly the idea of doing, like Kelly Sue and I right now doing our work, creator own work on Parisian White, that was through Image, but AMC has now, expressed interest in possibly doing things with it as well. So we'll see. So I think, if anything, the creators' rights movement opened up the doorway for creators to be taken seriously as part of a larger, I don't want to say franchise, because everything sort of seems to be a franchise right now. I remember when I was having a conversation a couple of years ago, in terms of when I was being represented by was ICM, I forget, whatever, like they change names all the time, and the alphabet soup that they are. But when they were talking to me about Stray Toasters, they viewed the character of Big Daddy. They were really hoping that he could be turned in sort of into the next Freddy Krueger, or the Shape, from Halloween. It's like, because they were thinking franchise, and that was the last thing on my mind when I was doing that series. I just was glad that it was a comic book. So yeah, I realize I might be getting far afield from the creator-owned things, but I think that creator-owned is great. It's like, it's still the way to go, because I think it gives you an opportunity to be more in control and to reap some more of the benefits. I do think that Kirkman with Walking Dead, and I think it's forced creators to be a little bit more on top of things, negotiation wise. But the opportunities to expand, and make a mark as a creator of something is as opposed to having it be created by a corporation.
Yeah.
That's the big deal.
What kind of advice would you give to somebody starting out regarding ownership of their IP?
I mean, I would say right now, through by hindsight or whatever, is that I mean, I look at the different things I've sort of created for Marvel, or DC or whatever, in terms of that I was so excited to work for the company, and look, in a lot of ways I still am. Comics have been great for me and to me, and Marvel and DC. I mean, every company I've worked for has been a plus. It certainly was a dream of mine, but I'm also aware of the fact that there were things that I did volitionally. I mean, nobody pulled the wool over my eyes. I signed away all the rights to creator-owned work and work for hire. I just because I so wanted to do the work. I so wanted to be part of the family and create, for comics. So a lot of the things that I did in my 20s and later, I look back at now, and the companies are a little bit better in terms of giving thanks and certainly financial acknowledgement, but not nearly to the extent that some of the executives might be getting. So what I would say is, if you can do your own work and own your own work, that's the way to go, because that affords you the greatest opportunities to have control, certainly, if nothing else. And I think there was also, like, even a band, like there was a documentary that came out a few years ago about Anvil, a musical group in Canada. And I think it was Anvil that said, one of the members of the band said, if you want 100% of something, it's like you can probably make more money doing concert gigs or selling your own merchandise than if you have a multi-platinum album for some other, for some studio, because the ownership aspect of it. So I would strongly push people who are into creating things, and I think with Instagram and with different publishing outlets online, Substack and other areas, and who knows what the next platform will be. I would
Twitter.
Yeah. It's like that seems to be crashing and burning. I mean, it's like, hi, I'm Elon Musk, and I want to shit every bit possible. I mean, I think we're watching a $44 billion, train wreck, in real time. But that's a whole other topic. So I it's like, I'm not trying to say that anything I'm suggesting is to malign, any of the corporations, but it's like, if you're going to sell your soul, if they're going to come and ask you to relinquish rights, it's like, obviously, like say someone like a George Lucas. I mean, what do you mean? Not every day you have was it $4 billion franchise? I mean, but um, that was a creator-owned thing that he's just sort of held on to. So yeah, so I would just say just follow that more than anything. Don't be so eager to give it away.
Do you approach it differently? Creating your own stuff versus versus playing in the established Marvel DC sandboxes?
Uh, yeah, probably. Although I can't quite think why. But well, there is no. I think with the creator own work, it's sort of. I don't necessarily think about what's going to sell, or what's going to be look good on a lunchbox, or made into a statue by Sideshow or something. I just think, what feels interesting to me. It might be something very small or personal. But yeah, there's two different kinds of pressure. There's sort of like, because as somebody working in comics, you kind of think of, well, what will sell? What will look kind of cool for these characters? And if you don't have the characters, it's sort of the pre-existing IP, and following or creating work in those worlds. They're easily navigable in some ways, whereas something that's completely creator owned can be so not that. It's like there's a level of freedom to just create anything, and sometimes that can be a little more anxiety provoking and confusing than to have some parameters that are familiar. So yeah, it's I think there is a difference.
Is one more fulfilling than the other?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like, for example, people ask me like, if there's anything I'm most proud of in terms of work that I've done, and in a weird way, it's like I'm proud of kind of everything I've done, for different reasons. It's like, and people will say, again, what's the favorite one? And that's a little bit like, which child is my favorite? I mean, certainly like Electra is a favorite for one reason, or another, because of certain things I tried or feel like we succeeded at. New Mutant, same thing, or even something like Brought to Light with Alan Moore, where I felt that politically it was important to do that, and to me it felt very like a success, and that I felt comics sort of bridged, journalism, and that was very something I was really proud of. Whereas Straight Toasters, I think the pride in that was that, for good or ill, it's like, I mean, the people who love it are passionate about it. It's like it's not a grand slam home run. There was no adamantium involved in any of that, or X powers. It was just my own weird little story that I wanted to tell. And like I said, the people who are passionate about it are very passionate about it, but because it's entirely mine, it's like good, bad, indifferent. At least at the end of the day, I can say this is entirely my thing, and that means a lot, at the end of the day. So yeah, you're sort of becoming your own mechanism, and you're sort of gently pushing yourself, or sometimes like doing it because you really have no other recourse. It's like, I just need to do this, because that was the thing about it. I remember feeling more than any other project, feeling the most anxiety, and also liberation, and also untethered from anything else, which was exhilarating and the most terrifying feeling at the same time.
Because it's all you.
Yeah. And
right?
Especially if you're looking for validation, which I think in some respect every artist probably is. It's like looking for the voice to be accepted or heard, or, making up for some childhood trauma or whatever. So it's like, oh my God, if I put myself out there, all of me, it's like, and it's rejected. Does that mean I'm rejected as, in my entirety? There's nothing to sort of hang your hat on, of comfort or familiarity, because it's hasn't been done before or created before until you do it.
Do you think if you did something like that now, like you would feel less anxious about it?
Knowing me, probably not. I'd probably
Okay.
still, no, I'm still, I still have that artist curse. Even now is like when, I mean, I've been doing this long enough. I would think that I would get, I would know the drill, in terms of what mental gymnastics or self-loathing or I used to know what I was doing. It's like, well, why isn't this getting any easier? It's like, there are certain things that get easier, and there are certain things that I like. I was just working on a couple of paintings today, and I was thinking, uh, it was just fighting me. I was like, I couldn't get into the zone. It was like work. It was just work, hard work. And it's like, and yet I had a breakthrough. It's like trying to fall asleep. I'm going to fall asleep. It's like, I'm going to get into the zone, and you can't get into the zone that way. What you do is you just end up fighting with it, and it just ends up, you get exhausted and you push through it. And then you're in the zone. You're like, how did I get here? And then you look back, and I would hate everything I'm doing today. And then I would set one piece aside and pick up another, and then pick the other one up. And I go, oh, that 10 minutes ago, 15 minutes ago, this thing, it was like, it's like, there was nothing but frustration. And I look at it now and I see opportunities to go in and run with it. So those mental gymnastics, that constant second and tertiary guessing, that gets tiresome. It's like I've worked with it for years. I've kind of gotten to the point where it's like, I know it's part of the program. I know it's in there. I'm going to just move past it and not let it get me. And it's like, and I'm much better at it 90% of the time. It's like, I know the drill. And then there are times when it's like, I might as well be like 11 years old, like picking up the brush for the first time, going like, I have no idea what I'm doing.
You all say that though. Like Walt Simonson told me when I interviewed him that like sometimes he starts drawing and he goes like, how have I forgotten to draw hands? Stuff
Oh
like
yeah.
that.
There's a pervasive quality to the creative process, and in a way it's kind of comforting to know that people like Walt go through it. I mean, Walt's just amazing. It's like you never quite think that somebody else is going to have the struggle that you yourself are having.
So his theory, and I'd like to hear what you think of this, is in the process of drawing that much or creating art that much, your brain expands so that you understand more things, but it takes a while for your hand to catch up.
Yeah, I suppose that, I guess I could see that. It's like, that's an interesting point. I mean, I'll have to like sit with that a bit. I wish I could respond to that. I'm gonna have to sit with it for we continue. But yeah, sometimes what it comes down to for me is well, I think the element of time and the lag quality. Like for example, I think more than anything, it has to do with a little bit of letting go than anything. There's the striving and the fighting and the digging, deep. And then there's the sense of resignation. And it's like, and not necessarily an admittance of failure, but just sort of like, standing at, in the pits or standing at the top of some mountain with your, wiping the sweat from your brow, kind of going like, okay, well, I gave it the best shot, and you're so close to it. And then you step back from it and then you can see it objectively. Cause you're, the big thing, I think maybe what Walt's saying is, in terms of the catching up, is that to me, I sort of hear that as being way too close to something to be able to assess it accurately. When I finally gave up the ghost in terms of trying to draw like Neil Adams. It's like, and I actively started just doing things not Neil, not like Neil, which in a weird way still made him the center, except in the obverse and in the or the reverse.
Yeah.
It's like I didn't work like Neil. I wanted to do the work that was not Neil. And so I kind of militantly went in other directions, even though possibly I could have solved something by going in the direction of Neil. I sort of forced myself not to. And what happened is that after I gave it up, and just started to embrace more of the totality of other influences and things that I was inherently or innately, that's when a lot of the frustrations I would feel about how I can't get my work to look like Neil did it. It was like I just saw all the flaws. And once I gave it up, it was like the pressure went out, and the Neil started to creep into the work because I wasn't trying so hard. It was like it was already in there from all of the years of trying it. And it was almost like, okay, like I stepped back, and it's like, and here's all these Neolisms kind of creeping in there. And it took me a while to sort of just work through all those. So, yeah, there's really no sense of immediacy in anything. Part of it is struggle. It's like everything has to become some kind of muscle memory at some point, like drawing, whether it's, Walt saying about drawing hands or not.
Yeah. You did mention you're going to plug this book, Bill Sienkiewicz Revolution. You did mention here, there's a quote, I thought it was great. No one warned me that everything that got me in the door was also going to come around and bite me in the ass. And that is, in fact, drawing like Neil, right?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, that everything can be both a blessing and a curse. It's like it's just part of the human condition. So, yeah, things that I love doing, that I really tried hard to do. At a certain point, you can almost have antipathy toward them as well, where they end up biting you in the ass, and it's like you, because you're trying to keep fresh. You end up becoming a prisoner in some respects, and that's why I think it's important to sort of maintain the primal, the primal position of being the dog that's wagging the tail and not vice versa.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think that says about the fickle nature of fans, editors, critics? Because, you come in and you're like, oh, great, he can draw like Neil Adams. And then a couple of years later, oh, he's still drawing like Neil Adams.
Well, the new wave becomes the old guard. Yeah, there's that. And then there's also, there's the shiny object thing, the latest thing. I mean, you look at the Beatles, and then you got the Monkees, and then you got all the boy bands, or or the Spice Girls. It's like every iteration, is out there. And during the period when I came in, there was certainly a whole slew of people who were influenced by Neil, or were Neil adjacent, or worked in continuity, and guys like Chaikin, who came in, who was working, his style wasn't necessarily like Neil's at all, but he came in and and sort of, there was a nexus, of people working there. So, I know certainly George Perez, had a big influence on a lot of people, and all the guys from Image did as well. So every generation has its familiar, or its touchstone.
Yeah, I feel like Phil Jimenez went through the same thing. Oh, he can draw exactly like George. Oh, he can draw exactly like George. Yeah.
Well, the thing is that, it's like Phil is, and it's interesting. I guess I see it, having gone through it. It's like I can sort of see the person and the talent underneath that. And it's like, and to a person, I sort of feel that anybody who is influenced by another artist, that's natural and normal to go through that progression. And I think that if anybody stays with that in terms of the idolatry and sort of, and using that as a touchstone and as their identity of who they are. Like they do almost everything they can to not be themselves. And that can include bringing all kinds of other outside influences. Like Phil is a much better Phil than he is a George. It's like he could do, but it's it's like, so what I guess I'm trying to say is that, we all have influences, but Phil, like by allowing himself to be who he is, it's like excelled at what he was doing in terms of the George like similarities, but also plus that, and then built on top of that, and became so much more than just quote a clone. He became, Phil, in all of his, brilliance. So, and I've seen this with other, so many other creators as well. It can be a real trap. I mean, there are artists out there, who I think of, whose goal is to completely subsume themselves and kind of hide behind work that looks like somebody else. Stylistically, it's almost like a familiarity to be, and that has nothing to do with loving a particular style that they might have grown up with. There's something about that feels like, we've already seen that style. It's like, you kind of get a couple of years grace, to sort of come in and be involved in another person's style. After that, you kind of need to sort of set it aside. At least, again, this is just subjectively for me. But I find that certain artists that I look at, whose work is really kind of all about being, somebody else's style. After many, many years, it's like that to me is unsettling, because I sort of feel, in a weird way, I sort of feel cheated.
Yeah.
Because I feel like if you have the chops to imitate this artist, or to regardless of, I can understand how much you might love this other artist's style, like we all do. It's like, and you may have proven that you can do it and do it really well. There's another part of me that feels like, okay, now, take off the training wheels,
Find your own voice.
Yeah. And finding your own voice may involve pulling in from way many sources than just one. It's like, rather than having, say, one major influence, you have many. And that it's like, if people say, well, how's that finding your own voice, if you're going to have all these other people that you're, imitate or being influenced by? But we're a culmination of our choices, of what does influence us. And as much by who we choose not to be influenced by, or sort of pull into our wheelhouse. I mean, certainly for myself, there are many very obvious influences, and then there are ones that people probably might not, recognize or see. I mean, Sergio Aragonés is a big influence on my stuff.
I know. When I found that out, I was like, wait, what?
Yeah, people go like, how? It's like, well, it's there. You can see it. Certainly with some of the mouths and certain things going beyond the perimeter of the head, like those kinds of things. But sometimes it's also not necessarily like an overt stylistic or artistic thing. It may be more a point of view, or a choice in terms of what, how to tell a certain bit of story. Do you go in a David Lynch version, or do you go full Sam Peckinpah for the violence? It's like, or Quentin Tarantino. It's like, how do you want to tell a certain part of your story? Do you go clinical and be more like Stanley Kubrick, or whatever? It's like, that those are all the things that sort of, I think about, and also like even in terms of musical aspects, do things feel musical to me? So, but I didn't mean to get aggression.
Yeah, your Watcher story in Marvel. I felt like there was a certain music to it. I kind of felt like he was kind of singing along to something, even though I couldn't, hear music in my head, but I could, the way that you did it, there was a certain rhythm to his
Yeah,
story.
I think that there may have been. It's been a while since I've read it or worked on it, so it's like I know that there were certain things. Well, I think partly also some of that comes through because I'm also a huge admirer of Aaron Sorkin, who sort of views dialogue as music. There's syncopation to the way people interact in anything that he writes. And I really love that. So so that I'm sure that probably crept in there too.
What kind of do's and don'ts would you tell somebody who's just starting out today, like with access to these new tools, digital, as well as all of the traditional tools?
At the risk of sounding like the old guy, um, with not necessarily even an agenda, but I would sort of say just keep, draw from life, all the things that I remember feeling like that were important to me in terms of my youth, in terms of just learning and being as much of a sponge is try everything, don't limit yourself, um, but also uh, don't make it too easy for yourself. It's like don't sweat don't beat yourself up. At the same time, you're gonna be, if you're invested in getting better, you're going to have moments when you feel like you're just not getting better. It's like you're going to be frustrated. It's a matter of trying to develop the right kind of personality or problem solving methods or coping methods or um, a creative mindset where you can deal with the frustrations that come up and acknowledge your successes and not lose sight of your goal. For me, I was saying this the other night. I was out to dinner with a bunch of folks from ZBrush, and we got a bunch of the sculptors, and I got into a conversation. And I remember I was just talking about, just kind of getting out of your own way and just the obsessive nature of creativity, of just um, loving what you're doing enough to also step back, and give yourself a break. At the same time, it's like you're going to, put yourself through boot camp in a way. So it's finding the right mindset to kind of bring to what you're doing, so that it doesn't destroy you, and it also doesn't um, bore you either. Because to me, like as I was saying to these other sculptors, I said, to me, my goal was just to be able to do enough good stuff so I can keep getting invited back to the party. So I can to me, the goal is like if you can do work and keep getting hired to do more of that work, to be able to do what you love doing, then to me that's a success.
Wow. That's incredible that coming from you for over 40 years in this business, and that's still what motivates you is being good enough to be invited back.
Well, yeah, to be able because to have opportunities to tell new stories a new way or whatever. It's like I guess like the point is that if I'm doing the work and it's like and I'm getting hired or I still love doing it. The difference would be giving something a shot that you love to do and then not being able to make a living at it. And then you end up having to go and do something else completely and kind of give up that dream. That to me is a heartbreaking thing. And I've known people who've had to do that. It's like they might be a musician, but they end up having to work in a job that it's a job. because they're not making any money doing, or not be able to make a living with their passion, with their art. For me to be able to continue to make a living doing with my passion, with my art. I mean, I'm completely useless. If I were put into a corporate world where I had to wear a tie and be, in a cubicle or something like that, it's like, I've pretty much worked to make sure I'm useless in that world anyway. But I couldn't do it. So for me, it's like, any kind of inspiration I can sort of sprinkle on anybody out there in terms of what to do is just, if you're going to go in to the, down this path of art, it's like, you got to go in 100%. I mean, when I was told by my father, it's like, I want you to have something to fall back on. My answer was no. It's like, if I have something to fall back on, I'm going to fall back on it. And I cannot, I need to leave myself no option.
No safety net.
No safety net whatsoever. Yeah. And that's insane, really. But it's like, it's just walking this line between, insane self-confidence and belief in yourself, or like the ultimate in delusion. It's like, where on the mental health, like scale does that all of that fall? And sometimes only time will tell.
Bill, in your experience and your own experience knowing other artists, how much of a successful career in art and comics is God-given talent, hard work, luck, and knowing the right people?
Talent's a part of it, but there's a lot of people I know out there who have done really well with very middling to low ends of what I consider artistic talent. They may have really excellent talents in sort of management or entrepreneurial things that they think of and can be viewed as a success creatively.
I don't suppose you'd be willing to name anyone.
I'm gonna defer. I'm gonna like and just kind of like beg off that one because
okay.
Yeah, just politically and otherwise, it's like like I said, I want to keep getting invited back to the party. But I think luck is a big part of it. Timing is everything, really, in a lot of ways, more than anything else. It's like, those confluences of events, like you can have a certain skill set and beat your head against the wall, and then it's like sometimes the industry or the medium will catch up to you. You may be, quote, ahead of your time.
Yeah.
I've seen that happen.
Do you think if Demon Bear had come out 10 years earlier, that people would have gotten it?
I don't know. That's a good question. All I know is that it came out when it did, and I sort of felt like it was a tough enough gamble in terms of the responses that we got anyway. Okay. Like, I remember I was at the red carpet for the second season of Legion. Yeah. And the reporter said, well, what do you think? It's like, how do you feel being here, with the second season of Legion? It's like, you must be feeling really great, or like, are you amazed that like that they taken this unusual series and made it into the second season? And I'm like, the only thing I'm hearing from your question is I'm experiencing a flashback, because it's like the second season of this TV series is one thing. All I'm thinking about is like, I still can't believe that they let Chris and I do it as a comic book back in the 80s. So all of this right now, this red carpet thing, and like second season, like, oh, and there's Aubrey Plaza, there's Noah Hawley, it's like, and he did Fargo, and it's like, oh my God, it's like, in the midst of all these incredibly talented people, and it's like, and I'm thinking, it's like, wow, it's like they let us do the the comic book. It's like all this stuff is just gravy. It's like,
Awesome.
because I just remember thinking, it's like this stuff is so weird,
Yeah,
It's
I'm
like,
sure.
so, you just you never know. You never know.
Yeah. What about knowing the right people? How important is that?
Yeah, I'd say that that's a big part of it as well. I think, and the right people may not be what everybody else's idea of the right people are. It's like they may have nothing to do with like positions of authority or power in the business. It could just simply be somebody with a fascinating point of view.
Yeah.
Because I tend not to be too binary, or in a lot of ways I try to be open to everything, but I do sort of put people into categories of two categories, and one is they're either inspirations or they're cautionary tales, and that's the that's a salt and pepper kind of analogy, you know. And I've met people who are incredibly successful financially and otherwise, who I want nothing to do with. It's like, or I in no way want to emulate. And then there are people I've met who, by all intents and purposes, by societal standards, like aren't viewed as successes, but have a great attitude and are centered in a way that I just find like amazing. And so they're more like, I want to be more like that person and less like that person. It's like, so yeah, I think you just, the thing is, like, all of these things about having other people, who you might know or whatever. I think big part of it is like try not to be an asshole. It's like that's a simple thing, but because look, there are people we all know who can be difficult to work with, but if it's in pursuit of something, a lot of their sort of rougher edges can be overlooked because it's in the service of something, or it's in the quest for something else.
That that's very true coming from you, because you are one of the people who, despite pushing Marvel Comics in a new direction, you got along with Jim Shooter.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, it didn't. Things are tough enough as they are, without trying to make enemies, and it's like if Jim and I disagreed on something, we would bust each other's chops, and it was like, and I was going to do it anyway. It was like, I mean, not that I was going to be like try to like antagonize him, but it was like I would roll it around in my head and go like, okay, he's got a point. It's like, let me try doing it, and then I'd weigh his opinions on certain things or his ideas, and whatever made sense I'd keep, and what didn't, it wouldn't stay.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't reject it out of hand. It was like I at least felt like I needed to, if I'm really being honest and doing the right kind of work, it's like I'm not rejecting approaches like just for ego. It's like, it's like because I'm not, so sure of myself that I think that there might not be a better answer out there, but it might be an interesting way of approaching something. And God forbid I learn something in the process, I mean, like that's always a plus.
Now I'm very curious, like, could you name a couple of people that you think are underrated?
Underrated.
Because you said, you see them as, well, your cautionary tales and what's the other one? Inspirational
Oh,
people?
well, there's cautionary and inspirations. I mean,
Yeah,
good God. I mean, like, it's like, I hate that when this happens, it's like, I find myself doing this,
because
like
there's
in
so many people.
well, down with downtime. It's like, I'll be reading through something and I'll look through some artwork or a story, whatever. And I'll go like, this person is just like a gem, is like, and it's like, keep this person in mind when you're asked about, whose work do you look at, or who do you think is really kind of special, that like, and I make these mental notes to sort of try to remember this, like a person, and that, like, some of them are kind of obvious. It's like in terms of, you know, stylistically. I mean, like, for example, there are people that are universally sort of loved by so many different artists, and then you kind of just look at the quality of their work, and it's so special. Like, I look at, like, Claire Wendling's work, it's like, and it's like, it's magical. It's like, and I'm not bringing anything new to this, like, to say that she's amazing. It's like, but there's something about it that, like, she's not doing, like, quote, superhero stuff. She's not like doing Batman. Or it's like, there's just, like, what she does is so distinctly hers, and it's exquisite, and it's just like, it's a pocket of magic in the middle of all of this other, so it's like, um sometimes those are the ones that I look at, and it's like, thank you so much for you being you. You mentioned Chris Ware. I look at his work. It's like, would I want to do that kind of? It's like, absolutely not. But do I love the fact that he's doing it? I mean, there was a cover he did a couple of weeks ago for the New Yorker
Oh
cover.
yeah, the
Kids in
school
the,
shooting one.
it's like Jesus. It's like, I mean, it's powerful stuff. So to me, sometimes the styles that have the most bells and whistles and sort of like grab you by the throat, it's like there are so many amazing talents that are, just brilliant in their own right, that um, they don't have to be a Marvel film, a Marvel movie. They can be, their own beautiful thing. So to answer your question about, like, some of the people who are like inspirations, I mean, it's like, Claire's one, I mean, that I was looking at recently. But you know, so many of the other ones that I'm thinking of, it's like, I must do a better job at writing these things down, so
It's
that
okay.
I'm not on the spot.
Richard Pace says that you, more than anyone that he's met, I think, know all of the tricks that you can do with tools, like spraying bleach on watercolor. What tips can you give someone maybe just starting out, or maybe has been there a while, that they can do with tools that maybe they haven't thought of? Like, could you think of a couple off the top of your head? Like, what exactly does spraying bleach on watercolor do?
Well, bleach not on watercolor necessarily, and certainly on dyes, and certainly on colored inks that are not meant to be pigment based, but bleach will actually cause some of the pigment or the color to fade, and to sort of, like bleach on a shirt, a pair of jeans or something. It will change the value, and do it in such like a spontaneous sort of way, and immediately, so that you can, you know, uh, go in and play with it more. Like, I love the idea of sort of the unexpected. See, I don't know what's going to happen sometimes, but I'm an inveterate tinkerer anyway. It's like, I'll buy a pen, like a marker, and it might come with a water-based ink. And what I'll do is like a flare or some kind of pilot pen, fiber tip pen. Although there's plenty of pens out there now that are archival ink. I'll find myself still taking a water-based pen, flushing it out, the wick. They usually come with a wick of ink inside. I'll flush that out and let it dry, and then I'll fill it with India ink. So I've got basically a disposable pen with a fiber tip that is permanent ink, and I can fill it with different colored inks if I want. And I know I can sometimes go and buy those kinds of markers, but there's something about making my own, which I love to do. I also was really into chemistry and physics when I was in high school. I probably would, if I think if I were to have gone into any other arena, probably chemistry might have been the thing that would have been an avenue I would have explored, because I love the idea of again, tinkering. But like, for example, like I'm working in water, like I work mostly in water-based media. I mean, I love oils, but over the years, I've gotten faster, and out of necessity, I started working in acrylics and watercolor because I needed to get stuff dried and be able to, finish up a piece at night where I didn't have to worry about the drying, time. Even though I could have used like Japan dryer or different kinds of cobalt dryers or anything else, or hair dryer to, get my oils to dry quickly. But because anything that's water-based, water as a solvent, it's like, and even with acrylics, with the medium or the solvent being water, I can find that the unifying factor is that I can use inks, I can use some water-based oils, I can use gouache, I can use acrylics, I can use regular gouache, which you spray it and it re-wets, whereas what's done in polymer or plastic or acrylic will not, lift. And then there are other things where I can do something in acrylic where it's not going to, it's more resistant to being lifted up off the surface. And then I can go in with different kinds of paint removers, or soy-based products, or polymer, like graffiti removers or things like that, and go in and scrape off some of the paint from the surface. So it becomes an exercise in chemistry as well. And I try to remember to wear a mask, and in a ventilated area, but part of it is not quite knowing what is going to happen. Well, and just to use that as an example, when I was doing a project with Steve Nile, we were doing 30 Days of Night Beyond Barrow. And I think I'd drawn Barrow at night in ink, and then permanent ink. And then I think I dropped in some shadows of, because it was covered in snow, and it was obviously at night. And I remember I came in with a solvent, some kind of solution that was a paint stripper, and I kind of brushed it loosely over the finished. I could see just enough of the line work and the structure of the buildings underneath the wash of blue of acrylic that I'd set down, kind of a grade sort of smoky blue. And then I brushed on the solvent, the paint remover, and then took a single edge razor blade, and I just started to scrape all of the rooftops. So it was, there was like, so I was kind of carving into the paint to make these kind of sculptural shapes of rooftops, kind of coming down to the white surface of the paper. And now I could have gone in and just painted around all that stuff, but there's something tactile about that whole process that I really love. And whether or not it's 100% successful, that's when you have to kind of go back in and just do the hard work. Like I've worked on watercolors where I'm doing a kind of tapestry or a rug or a floral pattern on a wallpaper or whatever. And I can actually cut out a piece of wallpaper and put that down. Or there are times when I want to paint it all and sort of just get in there and just massage the whole thing. And sometimes the only way to do it is to do it. It's like you can go in and scrape things out or roll things, or but if you want to get the tightest refined area, sometimes the only way to do it is to just go in with a zero brush and just paint it as well. So it really comes down to, what does the piece require? What does the piece want? What does the piece say it should be? And that is as much, I think, a personal point of view, because I'll talk to people about how to do, you know, a piece of art, or like try to work in terms of creating something. And 9 times out of 10, I'll when I say the piece knows what it wants to be, it's like I sort of half expect some people to just kind of check out, their eyes to glaze over. Like I'm talking granola, you know, like
Yeah.
woo.
No, I get it.
And the work knows what it wants to be. It's like, you know, but that's literally what I found to be true.
That's a great segue into my next question, because I want to share my screen to show a very specific piece that you've done. And if you'd like to walk us through it, that would be great, because I think it's great, but if you had made a change on this, I don't know if I would have known it was wrong. You know what I mean? So let me just share this. And I think that one. So
Okay.
this is the Electro Assassin Graffiti hardcover edition.
Right.
So for example, like there's a lot of lines on this thing. And if, for example, you'd made Garrett's eyes here, like maybe a little bit bigger, I don't think I would have known that that was wrong. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, again, it's like there are things that can be technically incorrect but emotionally correct, you know, and there are things that can be, you know, off but yet, you know, or nailed down but feel completely wrong for the piece. I mean, because, you know, with Garrett's eyes, or sort of the wonkiness there, there's an implication of something being off kilter, and certainly he is, you know. um and also just the abstraction of the shape of the foreheads there and everything else. It's, you know, next juxtaposed to the, you know, the front figure of Electra, or the female figure there in negative. um I mean, I know that when I did that, I also found, I think I was probably a smoker at the time, so I ended up adhering matte mediuming down the cigarette butts, you know, and then going in and screwing the wires into it. There was just something, again, very tactile about the whole process. Um, that sort of, this whole piece sort of felt uh, constructed, and like that there's a madness and a method, you know, which sort of typified Electra Assassin to me. Um,
Bill, when I
yeah.
when I take a look at this piece, I think that the question I would like to ask you is like, when do you know when to stop?
Well, on this one, obviously, it wasn't soon enough. Uh, I think this piece demanded excess, you know, and, you know, there's so few quiet areas on it. The only quiet areas are where the logo is, and then off to the right, that area right behind the bird, you know, and up over the top. Um, it needed just enough of that area, that negative space, to be able to work. Um, you know, for me. But yeah, I still struggle with. I've gotten better at when I know when a piece is done, and I'm finding that uh, sometimes it's easier just to stop at a certain place, and then think of it as being finished. Um, that not necessarily abandoned, but you know, it's like leaving it alone, and moving on to the next piece. That's why I found that over time I've actually gotten to the point where I'll work on multiple pieces in rotation, so that no one piece has a level of primacy or priority, or haven't put, quote, all my proverbial eggs in one basket, so that I can let each piece be sort of what it's going to be.
For over 40 years later, how do you still find new things to do with art? Is it just endless combinations of various tools?
Yeah, and it's also, I still love the idea of making pictures. It's just, and telling stories. So I find that it's sort of like life. It gives my life meaning and purpose. It's like things can be really, really crazy. And even when, like, I know I might be painting something particularly dark or like upsetting, there's still something about it that feels like it can be beautiful, as well. And aesthetically pleasing, even if it's dark subject matter or whatever. The more I think I have figured things out, the less I realize I've figured things out. It's like it's so much of what happens is unspoken, in terms of how I'm doing it. I mean, I can walk through process till the cows, proverbial cows come home, but and what went into certain decision making, processes. But other things are completely non, not like they're nonverbal.
You can't articulate it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just the given in the mess. It's like everything else is just sort of is can be broken down, but there's a certain point when words fail. It's like, and it just comes down to, does it feel right? Yeah.
You are working on Parisian White with Kelly Sue DeConnick. And how can you describe that to us? Like, what is it about? What's it been like working with Kelly Sue? When can we expect it out, and so on and so forth?
Well, we're in the process right now of getting going on because I've done a bunch of stuff for the first issue, figuring out the way to approach it, and that was really kind of the delay in terms of how, because I'd started on it with her a few years ago, and any sort of impediment was really my own in terms of how I wanted the series to look visually and read visually. It still hadn't kind of suggested exactly what it wants to be. I mean, some stuff feel like it needs to be completely realistic. Other things feel like, it can be more cartoony. Whereas Elektra, Assassin, and like say Daredevil, Love and War, that had a certain kind of abstraction to it. There's certain aspects of this series, since it takes place in an alternate universe, 1920s Paris, and it's more of a murder mystery, romance, thriller kind of approach. But certainly with that whole era of art, Art Nouveau, Art Deco, Belle Epoque, you name it, that whole style that is evoked. To me, I find that really fascinating. So I'm kind of just like looking forward to diving into it, and seeing, and again, I've tried to sort of impose my will on it, and part of the problem has been that it's letting me know, no, that's not it. That's not quite what it's going to be. And probably what's going to happen is that I'm going to try multiple approaches, and then I'm going to realize that there is no one approach, that the multiple approaches is the right way to go. And I'll just have to corral that so that it means what it's supposed to in the context of the series. And that's, again, that's where we go, another abstraction. I feel like I'm talking out of my ass, so forgive me.
It's fine.
But
yeah.
This next year coming up, we'll see some of it.
Well, what's it like? What's it been like working with Kelly Sue?
Oh, she's phenomenal.
She's on a roll.
She's just brilliant. She's absolutely brilliant. Well, I mean, we hadn't really spoken in a while because we were working on it, and then life sort of, there's with the lockdown and everything, and then my own sort of pulling back, not necessarily from her, but just to sort of I climbed up my own, head into my own head and sort of try to find the way how I wanted to tell the story, and what the story was telling me in terms of how to approach it. And I sort of And also I think that there's, I'm so excited to be working with her, and that I think I don't usually get too paralyzed by wanting to sort of like kick out all the jams. I just, analysis paralysis or whatever, that kind of creeps in there. But it's like I have such high hopes for it, for the series, and for what there are like things that I see that I want to try and do, that I can sometimes get myself a little uh, frozen by my own expectations, and I keep having to break through, any of that, and with a hammer and a chisel, and kind of get out of the way again and just let it be what it's going to be. So, and the only way to do that is to just simply dive into it, because otherwise you can end up fixing something to death, and it just all the life can get sucked out of it. So I realize that what's ultimately going to make it work is to have the deadlines in place and just have to get it done.
So in that case, you would know the piece is done because the deadline is up.
Well, sometimes sometimes there's a little bit of, the Lauren Michaels sort of approach to producing work, where it's, Saturday Night Live is like, we go on, we don't go on at 11:30 on Saturday night because we have all the answers or we know what we're doing, whatever. We're going on 11:30 at night on Saturday because it's 11:30 at night on Saturday. It's like you just have to show up sometimes, and it's like, and that in a way will be the answer. It's like, this is what it is. This is what this piece is meant to be right now, and then you have to move on to the next thing, and then adjust the future based on what came out.
Yeah.
It's like it's literally like, one foot in front of the other sometimes, because I can go back and forth and just push paint around and go, my hand nailed to my forehead and say, okay, I want it to be this way, I want it to look this way, but that it will exist completely in an abstraction. It's not until it's completely done that it's out. So
Bill, I'm down to my last three questions. I'm going to start with this one just because it's kind of a downer. 2022 has been very difficult for the comics community. I feel like you've been working on a lot of portraits. Is there anything, you would like to say? Because we've spoken before about Neil Adams and George Perez, but there's so many others: Kim Jung-gi, Tim Sale, Kevin O'Neill.
Yeah, that's kind of a pummeling that certainly for, I think, all of us who love comics and who knew so many of these creative people as inspirations and also as friends. Yeah, I mean, just from a human point of view and a friend point of view and an artist point of view, it's like, it just sucks. It's just painful to lose so many people. And it's like, and that knowing that, look, as we all get older, surely for me, when I was much younger, passing of friends or colleagues was the anomaly. And now here I am, in my 60s, and it's like, and there's a inevitability to it all, and it's like, and that doesn't make it any less painful or doesn't make it any easier either. It just stinks, so for me, finding out that what makes life worth living and is just to sort of not take any of it for granted and let people know what they mean to you, and certainly, not having, like, I hadn't seen, I mean, like with Kim, I was going to see him and he was going to be at the New York show.
Yeah.
And I'd never, and I was really looking forward to that, and obviously I never get the opportunity. So there's things like that happen all the time. So I just would love to be able to request that, like, death take a holiday for a while. Like, just, can we at least have a little bit of a break? Because there's also the part for me that is completely idiotic, in the sense that when so many other people passed away. It's like nobody's asking me to do the memorial portraits. It's like I've set that up for myself. So for me, it's like with other deadlines that I have, it's like, and it's like, somebody that I love or respected or realize was or know was very important passes away. There's a part of me that's going, I've got to do this piece, a memorial piece. And it's, if I'm under any pressure to do it, that's on me to do it. So it's like, so how do I not put that out in public and seem like the biggest asshole narcissist? It's like all of these people passing away. It's like I'm like, there's like, I have to do another portrait. It's like, it's so fucking stupid that it's like to even think that. It's like, it's like there's a part of me going, I want them to stop passing away because I want them to stop passing away. It's just simply that.
Yeah.
And but I mean, with Tim Sale, I mean, to actually do a piece before he passed, so he actually saw it. It wasn't a posthumous piece at all. That was unusual and surreal. But
because you guys knew that was coming, right?
Well, when Richard Starkings like reached out to me, as a good friend of his, reached out and said, Tim wants to see this. It was, surreal. And again, painful, but also kind of wonderful, to have that kind of experience as a touchstone, because I loved and respected him very much.
Yeah.
But I like anybody else, it's like, I just, can we just have a break, please?
Yeah, they used your drawing for the George Perez Memorial.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The hug man.
Well, that was him.
I thought it was interesting, like even from a technical perspective, because it's comparing your Neil Adams piece with your George Perez piece. I'm like you knew that George probably would have wanted it in pen and ink. And
well, yeah, I mean, the exuberance there. I mean, it's like I probably could have done a portrait of him in a different way, but to me, that was just who he was. He was just his hands coming out all the time.
And with Neil, it was like the most photorealistic thing possible. So I thought that was appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, I could have gone and done like a, like really stylistically much more of like the kind of thing that he would do. But I there was something about him. I just felt like I wanted to just realistically nail him in terms of for me as a source of as much as he pushed things out, in terms of like the anatomy and everything else that he did. To me, it was like he was really an incredibly human being. So I really just wanted to kind of capture that, with the portrait.
We were talking off the air earlier about the Filipino invasion of the 70s, and it would be wrong of me to not ask about that on the air. So what was it like being there in the 70s, seeing the Filipinos come in? Who were your favorites?
Yeah, I definitely want to do this. I am realizing we're getting down to the wire here in terms of like, I'm gonna have to leave soon, but it's like and capture the full level of the power of the backup feature. I mean, like we were talking about my first exposure to the Filipino guys, and certainly to Alex Nino in the Captain Fear backup. To me, I love the idea of the backup features. That was one of the sort of pluses of comic books back then, was that there were these surprising, add-ons, things that were unexpected. You go and you'd see something that was on the cover, might have a different interior artist, but to actually see like an 8-page backup story that completely took you off guard, and actually in some respects might have even made the issue even better, or took over the position of primacy, as a reader. Like it was like the backup feature was more powerful the upfront feature. And that was one of the things that I just loved about comics at that time, was that you never knew quite what you were going to get. Luck of the draw. And the fact that it was like in like 8 pages or smaller increments, it was like there was something about it that felt more special. It didn't. It felt like it just gave me enough of excitement and like the luck of, or the impact of the new, that it didn't overwhelm me. It was just like, oh, I want to see more of this. It's like 8 pages just works for me right now, whatever age I was. And it was just like, there's certain things that can happen. Like I find if I go to a museum or I'm around a lot of artwork, and I'll just spend it like, it's like brilliant painting after brilliant painting, or different brilliant comics, story after brilliant comic, page. And at a certain point, your brain just sort of shuts off. It's like, again, reading 8 pages, and then the next issue, so you see 8 more pages or whatever. You start to rack up oh, this person's a fan, like, it's like, I guess if I'm a fan and that is a fan favorite, this is this guy's definitely that. And Rudy Nebres and Nestor Redondo and of course so many others were Alcala, over John Buscema. There was a whole like vast like world that opened up when I started seeing their work. And the fact that they all kind of lettered and wrote and did, like, it was like they could do it, they did it all. It was like, wow, where have these guys been like my whole life?
Here.
Yeah, exactly. Well, until whatever happened politically there, it's like that brought them all here. I mean, it's like it may have been a more difficult position politically for them that forced them to work in the States, but it certainly was a gift.
I gotta say, it doesn't surprise me that Alex Nino is your favorite, because he is, of all of them, right? I feel like he was the most experimental.
He certainly was, and I've had the pleasure to know him and become friends with him, and also to sit and work with him at conventions, alongside him. And he'll work with with Copic, the wide Copic markers, and whether he fills them with India ink or not, I don't know. But when you see people working with paintbrushes, or they'll work with a certain nib, or a water brush that they'll fill with their own concoctions. A lot of supplies are ready made, and then other things are kind of ubiquitous. But it's interesting to see how somebody works with them. But I've never really seen somebody work with that thick, wide marker. The Copic, I think they're Copic 2 dot, period TOO, and they have like a 1-inch chisel nib, and he will do entire figures with that. It's very calligraphic kind of approach, and it's like, okay, I gotta try that. I gotta do that, because it's so ballsy.
Yeah. Yeah, the way that I've explained it is like, I love Alcala, but if he were to take off a book, I could probably put Nestor Redondo in there and kind of get that same thing. But if Alex Nino left the book, I will wait until he gets back from his vacation.
Yeah.
Before we continue with that book.
Yeah, Alex also do things where he can get incredibly ornate, and then he can also go completely like Toth-like and just chisel stuff out, and just, it's like minimalist. And I love that ability to know just how much to put into a piece.
Yeah.
And plus his sense of design and composition is exquisite. More so, not that the others aren't, but he's more of a designer in
Yeah.
that way.
Here's my last question, because today's November 19th. So when this interview comes out on the channel, it'll be very close to Christmas. And I would like to commend you and talk to you about the greatest Christmas book ever, which is your Santa Claus book.
Okay.
It's like, so I was reading that and I was like, what, how do you put this much effort into freaking Santa Claus? You know?
Well, yeah, it's a good question. I think for me, it's like the running joke is that, it's a children's book. It's a 128-page children's book that it's like, if you're going to read this to your kid, you need to start like take a page from advertising, like from CVS pharmacies putting up Christmas decorations right after they take out the candy from Halloween. It's like, start reading this book to your kid, in October 30th, but he'll finish it in time for Christmas. But it's like, I think it probably could have been like maybe 64 pages, at the end of the day. But I worked with the same packager publisher that I worked with on the Hendrix book. So they had asked me if I wanted to do it. I thought it'd be fun to do it. I was real big. I mean, Christmas was a favorite holiday of mine, and and the idea of playing with in the fantasy world of Santa, as opposed to the sort of dark realism and pop art stuff of Hendrix. It was kind of an antidote, to the Hendrix, and so I look at it, and it's got some interesting things that I think are pluses to it. Other things that I sort of feel like it's just there's a lot there. Let me just say that there's a lot there.
Yeah. It's a great book. It's a great looking book.
Oh, thank you very
Yeah.
much. Yeah.
Thank you, Bill. This was great. Is there anything else you'd like to add as we close off?
Well, since it's going to be coming out around the holidays, the Christmas holidays, happy holidays to everybody, and here's hoping 2023 is going to be a wonderful year, better year for everybody, and also in terms of what we were just previously talking about people passing, it's like it would be nice if we got some kind of break this year, and let some really, we have enough dark stuff happening, like from politics and insanity all over the globe to climate change or whatever. It's like, I'd like to see, this 2023, like just chill a bit, just chill,
I would be really glad if 2023 was boring.
I would settle for boring. Boring would be there'd be a level of ecstasy that would be under the undercurrent for boredom.
Yeah.
But I agree 100%.
Thank you so much, Bill. It's a pleasure having you as always.